All right, hi, and welcome to week 11 in SLP 104. We're talking about the specifics of what happens in the school age years now as we move continually through chapter 6. We've talked about the overview of how language is acquired through the school years, with pragmatics being the greatest area of growth and semantics being the second area of growth in the kindergarten through 12th grade years. Now we're going to talk a little bit more about that second area of growth and the influences on how vocabulary is acquired. And certainly, we talked a little bit last week about how written language has a different type of vocabulary than spoken language. And often the language of literature is much more colorful, it can be much more formal. It can be vocabulary that's less common. So the child learns both by the language that is spoken to them, but also by the language that they read and that is read to them. Certainly, vocabulary is influenced by social class. We know that children born in low socioeconomic environments have up to 35,000 to 50,000 less words that they get exposure to by the time they enter kindergarten. So definitely an uneven playing field, so to speak, in terms of children who are in upper middle class and middle class socioeconomic backgrounds. So social class definitely has an impact on vocabulary and how vocabulary is acquired and how it's experienced. Whether or not you live in a rural or urban community certainly impacts your vocabulary. Just by the vernacular of those two environments is dynamically different. We know light rail because we live here in Phoenix, but those might know, who live in an urban area might know Hogan or turbine engine, silo, those kinds of things that are specific to a rural community. And then adult versus child, or registers, formal register and informal register, or how adult speaks and how children speak, definitely influence a vocabulary. The three primary influences in how vocabulary is acquired. Vocabulary is acquired either by direct teaching from adults, so children go around going, "What's that?" and we label it for them. Children use clues of context, so they may hear a new word, but they listen to the context in which it's embedded, and they make the assumption or determine meaning based off of the context. They use the existing morphological background around the word. So based off of its place in a conversation, based off of its place and how it's used in a sentence, the child is able to determine if this is a noun, an adjective, if it's an action. Excuse me. I'm still recovering from that virus from last week. Apologize. And certainly, so context within the sentence itself is also a way to determine meaning. The primary, so we say, children learn language from adults. So who are the adults that a child learns language from, and how is it that these adults imply language or teach language to young learners? Well, certainly teachers, because in schools, they certainly spend a good 6 to 8 hours a day with their teacher. Parents, because parents are the influence in the home, and they are the ones with whom they may have home exposure to literature. Conversations at the dinner table cannot be undervalued. And then caregivers, so daycare providers, grandma and grandpa, anyone who provides care on a regular basis is certainly an adult model for the child. Typically, adults our job is to give the word, define it, and the child learns it, or we tell them to look it up. For speech and language impaired kids, often looking it up in a thesaurus is easier than looking it up in a dictionary. The whole idea of looking up words is metalinguistics. It's the ability to use words to talk about words. And for a child with an impairment, that can be very difficult. So the second way that children learn language is through context, and certainly they learn it through adult conversation with their peers, over listening to conversations, TV, movies. They learn a certainly a set of vocabulary as a young child, and then that vocabulary has continued to be increased in specificity and complexity, and becomes more refined as the child moves on into adolescence and adulthood. They use words to figure out words they don't know. So again, a little bit of that metalinguistic ability comes into play there. Morphological knowledge, so that the way they use context in order to determine what a word means, is they can use base or root words. The word hand is the root word, and handedness. How do we determine what handedness means? By adding in the ed and then the ness prefix. Endings, we then expand upon what that root word means. We build other words through compound words, so dog house, dog bone, dog food, with the root word being dog. Base words can be actions, or it can be nouns, and how they're used in the sentence is how the child determines what the word means. So handlebars, if you don't know what handlebars are, the root word being hand, and then handle, meaning to touch, and then handlebars, based off of context. If I say put your hands on the handlebars and you've never seen a bicycle before, chances are you'll come up with what the correct word is based off of context. Okay, so horizontal and vertical expansion of vocabulary. This is as we age, our vocabulary increases with precision and specificity. It increases horizontally and it increases vertically. In order to expand the ideas of horizontal expansion and vertical expansion, I've given you an assignment this week to give you some practice at it. I will tell you that you cannot use any of the examples written on the board here right now: blue, cat, run, change, tie, rock, or block. You must use an original word. I will tell you that it is easier if you use words with which you are familiar. And horizontal expansion is best done through nouns as you're learning, okay? So horizontal expansion is, and for each assignment, you need to horizontally expand one word and then vertically expand a different word, not the same word. So horizontal expansion, it is through horizontal expansion that we add distinction or difference or definition to the word. So when you're little, I say, what color is that? And you say blue. As you get older, I ask you, what color is that? You might answer turquoise, periwinkle, navy blue, royal blue, teal, baby blue, powder blue. So all these blue variations are distinctively different from each other. So you can certainly add variations just by the type of blue I'm talking about. But that's not the end of semantic distinction. Semantic distinction also expands to how we define a particular word. So we'll take, for example, the noun cat. If I said to a little small child, what's that? It's a cat. How do you know? It has whiskers. It has fur. Good. So you're adding semantic distinction to the definition of cat. Cat has features. So they would label the features that belong to cat: whiskers, paws, claws, fur, tail, pointed ears. And then it expands even further. So then, just as the example I gave earlier with blue, we then add and expand cat to be Siamese, Burmese, tabby, calico. And so it is expanded not just by the cat's features, whisker, paws, claws, but also by the type of cat that it could represent. So that's horizontal expansion. Vertical expansion is basically multiple meanings of using the same word. Be very careful here in your assignment. When you give vertical expansion, be sure that the meaning of the word in the sentence that you use is different. Okay, so the word run, I can run a mile. I have a run in my pantyhose. I need to run to the store. The car is running. Each of those means significantly different definitions of run. Run to the store meaning a short errand. Run in my hose meaning a tear or rip. The car is running, meaning the engine is turned on, and I can run a mile, meaning I'll bend my knees in a swift action to move from one place to another. Each of those runs is different. Let's look at change and expand that vertically. Change can mean I change my clothes or the change in my pocket. Those are two different expansions of the word change. It is not a vertical expansion to say, I change my clothes, I change my shoes, I change my hair, because each one of those means exactly the same type of change, meaning to alternate or to make different. Those are not representative examples of vertical expansion. In order for it to represent vertical expansion, the meaning of the word you are expanding must change. So we'll do another one. The word is tie. I wear a tie around my neck. The game ended in a tie. The railroad ties were charred in the crash. So, and I can tie my shoe. So the tie around my neck is men's clothing or neckwear. The tie of the railroad is a piece of wood or metal used to run a track. The game ended in a tie, meaning a score. Two teams have the same score. And then I can tie my shoes, meaning I can make them into a knot. So each of those meanings is significantly different for tie. All right, so this week your assignment is to both vertically expand a word and then to horizontally expand a different word. Do not try and expand them horizontally and vertically and using the same word. Well, how does vocabulary change over time? Well, they go from very concrete to more abstract. They start off with definitions that mean something to the child and then become more broad. They may have very personal definitions of a word, and then it grows to a more mutual or group or social awareness or understanding of what the word means. They often define by features and functions. So if you ask a small child, you hold up an apple and you say, what is it? They say, apple. What do you do with it? They'll say, you eat it. Rarely will they say, it's a fruit. So most often, a child will define by feature and function. They'll say, it's red, and you eat it. And that's just a common way that young children define words. As they get older, they will define by category. Excuse me for 1 second. I'll be right back. Apologize for the interruption. So children will define, you show them a shoe, you'll ask them, what is it? They say shoe, what do you do with it? You wear it. Rarely will they say it's a type of clothing. So that becomes a skill that they learn later on. And children don't automatically horizontally and vertically expand vocabulary. It happens over time. So they have one simple form of a word, such as square, and that definition grows in complexity as they comprehend. So square becomes more of a 3D block. And then it expands vertically to include a city square, a square of chocolate, someone who acts like a square, and then Hollywood Squares being a game show that was from eons ago. Probably none of you were old enough to remember that. So they've got all these new words. Well, how do they go about keeping them all? Well, they go about keeping them all by chunking them. They place words together based off of common semantic relationships. So all animals go together. If I asked all of you to pick a large group of animals, or even to list animals in a group. You might say dog, cow, horse, pig, elephant, zebra. And then if I asked you to keep going, your retrieval would become more and more specific. Platypus, iguana, bearded dragon, dolphin, bottlenose dolphin. It becomes more and more specific and more complex as I ask you to continue your retrieval. But you retrieve based off of common semantic features of animal. Why do we store information in this way? It's so that we can retrieve it more easily. The whole purpose of effective storage is not to store it effectively, but so that you can retrieve it effectively. When we do classifications, which is what we do in therapy, the idea is not to teach kids just the vocabulary word, but have them be able to use it at will, have them be able to use it when they need it. So the idea of chunking is less about learning how to put the words together, but it's putting the words together in order that they can retrieve them effectively and efficiently when they need them to. And you can sort vocabulary or classify it or chunk it in several different ways. For example, if I said, which is which, you understand the first which to be the question word, which meaning the broomstick and hat wearing person as the second which, and the last which being an alternate or a choice, yet the words are the same. If I said cotton ball, cloud, milk, and a plain t-shirt, how do those all fit together? You might say those are all white things, so you can classify things by attribute. You can classify things by context or social group. I can give you some examples here. Oh dear, it's a deer. I actually had this happen on my way up to Jerome recently. My husband was driving a rather windy road, and I went, deer. And he said, what? And I went, no, deer, meaning there was a deer on the side of the road. He said, well, can you not do that? Because he was driving on a windy road. He thought maybe he, had missed something or was getting too close to something. And he thought I was exclaiming like, oh dear, be careful. And I was just exclaiming, no, there's actually a deer on the side of the road that has antlers. So we actually ran into that contextual confusion recently. You can certainly do categorization by social group. So if I'm talking to you folks, I might say, I'm not feeling well, I'm feeling sick. But in a group of teenagers or young adults, they might say, oh, that new song is really sick. And those two do not have the same meaning. So, and then word associations, if I said something that comes in a cup that's brown that mommy drinks and you get it at Starbucks, you make the association that I'm talking about coffee. So let's go back over that again. We chunk information based off of common semantic features. We do that in order to facilitate retrieval. You can facilitate retrieval by storing by chunking in common categories, but also by sound cues or auditory cues. So if I say, I'm thinking of a type of cheese that's yellow or bright orange, people like it shredded or on hamburgers, and it's called ch. And I give you the first sound cue, ch, you would think cheddar. Retrieval can also be facilitated through visual representations. I show you a picture, I say, where is this from? You go off of what you know. Taking a test, I might tell you, look on the board where it used to be written, the information for this part of the question, and you can actually picture on the board where that note was written. How often you use it impacts your ability to retrieve it. So your phone number from your spouse or child, you might remember, but maybe your colleague's phone number you don't. Why? Because you don't use it as often, and now in this day and age, we don't use phone numbers as often as we just use their name to retrieve how we would call them on our phone. As far as moving on into figurative language, remember language starts, or vocabulary starts very concretely. Then it moves into a more abstract language. And so it really is in the later part of adolescence, 11, 12, 13, even 14, 15, 16 years old, where figurative language becomes something easily understandable. But children as young as 9 and 11 can explain figurative language through metaphors, idioms, similes, proverbs, humor. If I said, oh my gosh, she's a real train wreck, most 11-year-olds will be able to explain that. But though even children as young as 5 will use them, they don't necessarily understand them or be able to explain them. Excuse me, they can understand them, but they don't necessarily explain them. And again, that's that metalinguistic ability, the ability to use words to talk about words. Okay, so that's the end of our broadcast for tonight. I apologize for the late start and the small interruption. Hope you have a great evening, and I look forward to meeting with you next week.